If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd work for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife.
I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, where the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me.
And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt
I love this
land.
God bless the USA.
God bless the USA.
From the lakes of Minnesota
to the hills of Tennessee,
across the plains of Texas, oh, from sea to shining sea. From Detroit down to Houston, and New York to LA, where there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say, oh, and I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me.
And I'd rather stand up next to you and defend her still today,
'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
God bless this country. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free.
And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up
Next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land.
God bless the USA.
Well, hello, and I'm Janet Moran, Executive Director of Priest for Life. Welcome to Just Ask Janet. And didn't you love that song? I just get very emotional every time I see it. And I think, we're going through so much right now with this undecided election and the recounts happening. And, we really have to really be proud to be Americans and keep praying, because I think we're going to have a good result. Once the lies are taken away and the truth comes through and all the illegal ballots are thrown out. I'm in favor of everyone voting who is legally registered to vote. And I'm all in favor of counting all the legal ballots that were cast up to and including November 3rd. And so I heard they threw out some ballots in Pennsylvania already that were, done after that. So we just have to be patient and pray, and justice will prevail, because a lot's at stake, because if we don't get this right, people are going to lose confidence in our system of electing candidates. So let's keep the prayers going. And speaking of prayers, we're going to have a very interesting discussion for you right now, because joining me is, we call each other sisters, but I guess we're sisters in Christ, but we've kind of adopted each other as sisters. It's my dear sister, Teresa Tomeo. You see her, of course, with me on the Catholic View for Women. But before even coming to the Catholic View, Teresa was in secular media, and then she gave all that up a number of years ago and just does Catholic media now. And she has a great radio program on EWTN radio every morning, Monday through Friday, called The Catholic Connection. She is absolutely awesome. And she does just all kinds of other stuff. Speaking, of course, right now, she's been doing more virtually speaking than in person, but But once we take care of that, she'll be back on the road real soon. And she's written, I don't know, over a dozen books. It keeps going and going and going. So welcome, Teresa, my dear sister, to the program.
Hello, Sister Janet. I love the name of the show, Just Ask Janet. It's adorable. And it's great to be on with you.
I need a jingle, right? I need a jingle.
Yes, and it's great to always be with you and support the amazing work of Priests for Life. You guys are just incredible. Thank you for all that you do for life.
All right. So I alluded to the fact that, you were in the secular media. You were actually in the Detroit market. Just give them a little quick snapshot of your journey, because I know we both share the story of we were bad girls. We went away from the church for about 2 decades, and now we're back for good. But give them a quick snapshot.
Sure. Just a quick summary. I started working in the secular media shortly after I graduated from college in 1981. It was my dream. I was an award-winning television and radio news reporter, and things were going really well professionally and personally. I met a great guy, Dominic, to whom I'm still married, thanks be to God, a Deacon Dom, who became a deacon 8 years ago. But along the way, before we came back to the faith, we were both raised Catholic, cradle Catholics in Felloway, as you mentioned. Along the way, the world stepped in and really skewed our view of things. We did not have really a Catholic view. We had more of a worldly view of everything. And that changed. And it changed our relationship to the point of the fact that we were becoming so materialistic and having everything based on our careers and our professional growth that we lost sight of God and we lost sight of each other and hit rock bottom. And Dominic was out of the blue. It's a long story, and we've shared it on the Catholic View for Women, and it's in many of my books. But out of the blue, he was invited to a non-denominational Bible study, and that led him back to the church, which led me back to the church. And eventually, I left the secular media in the year 2000 because I just felt that, JM, that my talents as a writer and as a broadcaster were not being used wisely. And there was a lot of bias, but there was also this sensationalism and the blood and guts stories. And there was a lot of things that caused me to leave. And when I left, I didn't have a job. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't do what I was doing anymore. And so eventually God honored that decision to just walk away, not knowing what was up next. And he eventually led me into Catholic media. And that was 20 years ago. And I've been on the air on Ave Maria. Now this month, it's 18 years having my own Catholic radio show. So,
and it's awesome. And, if you currently, brothers and sisters, have not listened to Teresa, I highly recommend Monday morning, tune your dial, go to EWTN.com, click on the radio little symbol there, and you can listen to Teresa live every morning from 9 to 10 a.m. nationwide, right? And
it's perfect. Yes.
Yeah. And she has the best guests. Sometimes even Father Frank and I are on her show. But yes. She covers all. I mean, I know you've been going. Your Italian temper's been going crazy between what the Pope said and the McCarrick report and come on, she's been going nuts. But she has great guests on to talk about these topics. So I highly recommend tune into Catholic Connection Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. on EWTN Radio. You won't be sorry. And if it's on, you can get EWTN too if you have Sirius satellite in the car too, I know.
Yes. So, yes. Channel 130 on Sirius, yeah.
And then, of course, you and I first met on a Catholic Answers speakers cruise. I was there with Father Pavone, and that's when we first met. I think it was, my goodness, it must have been all the way back, I think, in 2005 or 2006. It was way back.
Maybe even earlier than that. I thought it was 2004, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Shortly after I started working at Catholic Radio. I started working there in 2002. So I think it was right around that time, Jam. It's been a while.
It's been a long time. But, of course, see, Teresa, she currently lives in Michigan. But her family's originally from Jersey City.
Jersey City.
Course, you can tell by my accent. I'm a New Yorker, born in Brooklyn, et cetera, et cetera. So we have that East Coast fire in our guts. And so we, connected instantaneously, didn't we?
I think we became best friends by the end of the cruise, and the rest, as they say in history, we just hit it off. And I mean, I had known of the work of Father Pavone. I had heard of you as well because I had seen you at various events, but that was the first time I was able to spend some quality time with the two of you and to be able to attend Mass every day with Father and hear his homilies. It was just fantastic. But, your idea was the Catholic View for Women, and eventually EWTN, thanks be to God, agreed that it would be a good idea. And gosh, how many seasons have we been doing the show now? I can't even remember.
We're actually going in December, ladies and gentlemen, to tape our new season that will air in the spring, and that will be season number 13.
Wow.
Right? Amazing.
I can't believe it, Sam. Wow.
And we have a lot of fun doing it, don't we? We do.
We do. And it's fun because we get to go see all the great people at EW. I was teasing Doug Keck this morning, who was on my radio show. He joins me. He's the president and chief operating officer. Really, really nice guy. And he's on every Friday on Catholic Connection talking about what's coming up and the different interviews we're going to see on EWTN. And he has this big no button. Did you ever see that no button that's on his desk?
Yes.
And so you'll like stick your head inside and you'll just, hi, Doug, and I'll hit the no button and it'll yell no. So the people are really fun down there. They work really hard and they do everything on such a shoestring budget. It's amazing the amount of work that they produce, but we love going down there. It's just a blast to be with everybody at EWTN.
Right. And we'll be doing that, oh my gosh, in a few weeks. I can't believe it.
Yes.
Yeah. So now, as I mentioned, with the whole coronavirus, the pandemic, you normally are out on the road like I am and Father Frank, speaking at conferences and all that. I know you do great book signings. But before we get to your newest book, I'd just like to shine a little bright light on you wrote a book quickly during the beginning of the pandemic. Tell us about that book.
Yes, that book was birthed out of a lot of what I was going through. My mom Rosie had just died. She didn't die of COVID. She died right before the COVID hit. She died of congestive heart failure. She was slowing down, 94 years old, bless her heart. And as everything was happening, I just felt the Lord telling me to put out a resource for people because we were starting to really shut things down and people were struggling. Catholics were questioning, wondering what was going on. Mass was shut down for so many months in many places. And so I just sat down and it poured out of me and it ended up being a book. The book is called Conquering Coronavirus, How Faith Can Put Your Fears to Rest. I wrote that book in about a week. It just, again, poured out of me. And I was in my office.
And where could they get that book?
Amazon.com or my website. My
Amazon.com.
And
I want to mention when you said, because I knew Rosie, her mom was a hoot. Her mom was a hoot. And you're right. She didn't die of the coronavirus, but what was very sad was because of the restrictions. First of all, you had to wait over a week, I think it was, from the time she died till you had her burial, and you couldn't even have a funeral mass for your mom.
No, we couldn't. Right? We couldn't have a funeral mass until July. The end of July, we had a funeral mass that we were able to, thank God, live stream. So many of my friends who couldn't be there, including yourself, you were able to watch. But that was, I think, the hardest thing for me, and I put that in the book because. Again, she didn't die of COVID, but when she did die at the funeral home, when my father passed away, it was incredible. They had so many people come to the funeral home that they had to put out, I don't know how many other chairs, because my father was in the choir and everybody loved him and he was such a sweet pea. And everybody knew my mom. They knew both my mom and dad because they were active in our parish. We moved to Michigan when I was about 5 years old, and my parents got very involved in the parish and were in it, for decades. And so my father's funeral was amazing. The funeral mass was amazing. The choir was there. The funeral home was packed to the gills. And when we were sitting there in the wake for my mom, we were only allowed immediate family, JM. So there's only about 10 of us because we have a lot of relatives still on the East Coast. And I turned my head and I got all choked up because around the corner was the room where my father had his wake. And again, people were overflowing into the hallways and it was packed to the gills. And there's Rosie, and there's 10 of us. And I just, it was very, very difficult, very difficult. And then we couldn't even have a much graveside. We had a graveside service, thanks be to God, with Monsignor, our pastor, but the mass didn't come until months later. So there was a double grieving for us because in addition to losing her, we didn't have the usual beautiful Catholic sending off that we do. So that was tough. It was really tough.
And you know what, Teresa, you're not the only person. I know quite a few people experience the same thing. And I think for our viewers right now, you're probably, identifying with this story because I know so many people said there were plenty of people who were dying of natural causes during this whole pandemic. And now suddenly this was thrust upon them. You mean my family member can't have a proper funeral mass? I mean, because you always found the funeral mass so comforting, right?
Yeah,
to have that casket brought into church, the blessing, all that stuff. We're used to those rituals as Catholics, and they're comforting. And to have that all stripped away. Yeah. I mean, it's been terrible, I think, during this whole pandemic that not to be able to have a proper funeral mass, I think for so many Catholics was, and like you said, then it's a double whammy because then you're going to grieve.
And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, because the first book, COVID, which came out in May, because it was really a catharsis for me, because I just needed to really work through all that for myself. And I'm thinking about, if I'm going through this, there's probably a whole host of my listeners and other people out there, Catholics, who are going through the same thing, obviously, because even if people weren't dying from COVID, they still had deaths in the middle of that, right? Because people die every day. And so that was something I thought I could write and I didn't think that it would still be useful now. We all thought we'd be over this by now. But the book is seeing somewhat of a resurgence. And again, if people want it, they can go to Amazon, Conquering Coronavirus, or they can go to my bookstore on my website, which is teresatomeo.com. But yeah, I wrote that very quickly, and it's really helpful because at the end of each chapter, there's questions. There's also an extensive resource guide of prayers and and I wrote it not just about coronavirus, though. I wrote it about suffering. I wrote it about getting through difficult times. So coronavirus is kind of like the overall idea of, okay, we're going through this incredible crisis, but this isn't the only suffering we're going to have. I mean, if we're on this earth, this is not heaven, and we're going to go through bad times. There's going to be ups and downs. So what do we do as Catholics? And to build on the resources and to draw from the resources that we have in the Catholic Church. I think people, if they haven't heard about the book, Conquering Coronavirus, I think they'll find it very, very helpful.
Well, I also think, Teresa, it'll be helpful now because of the uncertainty with this whole election thing we're going through. Every day, I've been doing like this with some of the news, la, 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 because your head spins.
It's too much.
It's too much. Yeah. It's too much. I mean, when you think about, remember back in April when we were in lockdown? Oh my gosh, every night at 5:00, the president and the whole COVID team came out and gave all the updates. And we would sit there hanging on every word. How are we doing? Oh, and meanwhile, you couldn't get toilet paper. You couldn't get paper towels. You couldn't get wipes. You couldn't get, disinfectants and things. The stores with shelves were being wiped out. They were telling people, stop doing that, stop hoarding. But it was consuming our lives. And so I think this book would be very good too for right now, because the election crisis is consuming our lives too. So the peace and the way you're directing people spiritually, I think, in that book can be very useful right now, right?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting in the book that just came out this month, as a matter of fact, Sophia published both the Conquering Coronavirus, which came out a few months ago, and they're also publishing my latest book, which is out now, actually this Sunday as it hits the bookshelves, and it's already on Amazon. It's called Listening for God, The Incredible Ways God Speaks to Us. They're a nice pair. We're actually going to be selling them as a set because they work well together for people, because what you're hearing, you need to be able to block out all this noise and listen to God. I'm not saying that you shouldn't keep up on the news, but you have to learn how God speaks to us, because right now people are so overwhelmed, especially Catholics. We're punch drunk in terms of what's pending in the election, possible attacks on pro-life causes, marriage, all the things we care about so deeply. So the COVID book, in combination with Listening for God, The Incredible Ways God Speaks to Us, I think will be very helpful and uplifting, because in the latest book, I share my own stories of miraculous ways God has spoken to me through scripture, through other people, through even angels. I had a very powerful angel experience when Dominic and I were in Italy a few years ago, and I share that. And then we hear from very well-known media personalities in the Catholic world, such as Al Cresta and Steve Ray and Kelly Walquist and Joan Lewis. And then we hear from a lot of average folks, average Catholics, lay Catholics. I don't want to say average in terms of that they're not great people, but I mean, they're lay people. They're friends of mine, or they're people that I know have really incredible stories. One of my friends is a longtime pregnancy resource center director, and she has a really cool story in there called The Accident That Was No Accident. And it's how she kind of gave up. A young woman came into her office, and she was abortion minded. It was her first day on the job as the head of the pregnancy resource center. And she did everything she thought correctly. She, said all the right things, gave her all the materials, tried to convince her, about the baby and whatnot, that there were other options besides abortion. And the girl said, well, no, I'm just here to tell my boyfriend I came in. I don't want this baby. I'm having an abortion. Well, the rest of the story is really an intervention with God. And so that book, Listening for God, shows that even in the most confusing and stressful times that we have, that God is speaking to us, and in ways that might surprise us, and in ways we may not expect. It could come in a song. It could come in scripture. It could come in a friend. It could come through a total stranger. It could come, Al Cresta's story is really cool about how he had an affirmation about something that he decided to finally do from a store clerk. So all of these ways that God answers us if we are only able to listen. So Sophia is putting together a special package, a Christmas package for readers. You'll be able to get the COVID book and also the Listening for God book together. But to check them out, you can go to order them. You can go on Amazon. They're both available. And to get more information, there are summaries on my website under my bookstore at teresatomeo.com.
That's great. So now, Teresa, you just wrote the coronavirus book, in the spring, and then what did you do? Jump right into this book right after that?
Yes.
I mean, you really did this an incredible, like I would call this almost light speed, right? Writing these books, no?
Yes. Although I will say I'm a little different than most people in the sense that when you're trained, and I'm not bragging. I'm just saying what I do for a living. If you talk to anybody who was a reporter and had to crank out stories, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories a day, which is what I did for 20 years. And then when I was in radio news before my TV news, I was doing several newscasts, writing them all myself. So turning out a lot of written content is something that we're trained to do. Now, a book is a whole different ballgame. I get it, but this is my, I think it's my 15th or 16th book. And what I have to say that the Listening for God book, because people were contributing stories, I have 5 or 6 stories of mine in there. I have a couple of chapters on how to hear from God, with what the church says about tuning into God and what our saints can teach us. But it was a little bit easier. I mean, the people contributed half the book. So that was done fairly quickly. The other one was quick as well, but this one was not that difficult because I had all these great contributors. But I love to write, and since I can't speak, Dominic says I keep writing books because I can talk longer. It's another way for me to talk. So I mean, I love to write. I've been a writer ever since I've been a child. So yeah, I've never cranked out 2 books in 1 year, so it's probably a record for me. But what the heck? I wasn't traveling, so I might as well put my time to good use.
And that's one thing we've all discovered right now with not traveling. I mean, I haven't been I got off my last plane on March the 9th. Okay. And this Monday, I'm getting back on my first plane during this whole crisis. I'm going out to California to see my grandkids, and I'll be out there I'll work from my daughter's house,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little nervous, haven't done this in so long, and all the precautions.
It's fine. I flew, as you know, in September. Deacon Dom and I took off for a week's vacation. And I'll tell you, JM, it was actually better than because you and I travel all the time. We're always on planes. We're always speaking, going somewhere. And you and I probably were equal in our traveling 3 or 4 times a month easily, if not more. Right. And I think it's actually a lot better because it seems to be, I mean, the airports were always clean, but it seems much more sanitary, even in our famous Delta Club, because you and I travel so much, we're members of the Delta Club. It seems just a lot more sanitary, and the planes are cleaner, and the lines are not as long, and it's very safe, very, very safe. I had no problems. And I'm flying again down to meet you in Alabama in a few weeks. So yeah, people should not be afraid. They should be willing to get out there and enjoy it and do what they can.
And Teresa, that's why I think these 2 books are going to help people. The phrase you just said, "Don't be afraid, be not afraid," be not afraid, like St. John Paul II is. Because, I even spoke to Dr. Ray, our good friend, Dr. Ray Garundi, about this. And he said, what's happened is people have gotten paralyzed with fear because of the coronavirus, because of having so many months being in some states, everybody was in lockdown in April. And then some states, they let people, out a little bit more. But other states, they kept them locked down for months, with very strict things. And you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. And now to venture out with some people, you have to almost convince them it's okay to go out now. It's okay. Yeah. And, so I think your 2 books are very timely because, it's a spiritual battle here we have to have, with ourselves to say, if you're doing all the right things, if you're doing the hand washing, if you're taking your supplements and your vitamins to boost your immune system, if you're eating healthy, if you're using hand sanitizer, you're wearing your mask when you're, among other people, you're doing everything possible not to get coronavirus. I mean, what else are you going to do? And the good news really is, excuse me, I think now it's 98% recovery. Is the statistic now.
98%, you're correct, yes.
98%. So brothers and sisters, this is not what it was back in March and April when they were playing catch up. Let's find out about this and see what's going on. And now we know. And some of the myths back then of where you had to wipe down boxes that they got delivered, leave them out for 24 hours, all that they said, well, no, that's not how it's spread. It's the droplets, it's in the air and all that. So I think, your book, I can't wait to get my copy, to be honest, of Listening for God. I'm going to be ordering it and get it because I think we all need that comfort right now in our lives to go deeper and spiritually and trust in God, because he's got our backs. We're going to get through this just like other crises. I think back, Teresa, and you might recall this too, for September 11th. Of course, I was in New York at the time. And there was a paralyzing fear that we had to overcome. Were the terrorists still on Staten Island or still in Manhattan? Was there going to be another attack? But after a while, everyone got back to normal. And that's going to happen with this too. I really think so, So
well, I think and by the way, I'm sorry, my neighbor seems to be mowing his lawn. I don't know if you can hear that outside my window. Okay, good, because it's very
we're good.
For me, but hey, what are you going to do? This is what we do during COVID. We do everything from home. But the thing that's frustrating to me is that the media are giving us. People have to understand, the media are a business, okay, and they're run by ratings. They're run by advertising. The more they can get in the ratings, the bigger groups they can get in particular demographics, the more they can charge for ratings. And one of the ways that they increase those ratings is they keep people scared. If they can keep you scared, they're going to keep you tuned in. As a matter of fact, we used to have consultants coming in the newsrooms and doing these, team meetings, saying that there were certain types of stories that we had to have in what they call the first bag, or the first 5-10 minutes of a newscast. And that a lot of it had to do with fear. And obviously weather was really important, but there had to be something to get someone's attention. So it's kind of like the whole thing with, like going down a freeway and seeing a car crash where people are going to be gawking at it or whatnot. So the media are built on fear in the sense that they try to keep your attention. So what you have to do is, we're not supposed to have this spirit of fear according to Scripture. You have to use our God-given common sense. Nobody's saying not to be careful. Nobody's saying not to be cautious, obviously, but it does not mean that you can't go about your lives while being safe. And even the experts that I've had on my show, Deacon Dr. Timothy Flanagan, who's amazing. He's been working with all the Catholic physicians around the country. He says we have to get back to living. We can't be cooped up. And because what's happening, Jam, and I know you've heard this, is that the quote unquote cure is now much worse than the virus itself. The suicide rates, the addictions are up, pornography, domestic violence, child abuse, all of these things are increasing at rapid rates. And it's really frightening because people are just so tired of all of this, and so many people feel so desperate. So you always have to be cautious and follow the regulations, but at the same time, live your life. You can do things. Obviously, there's some limitations, and we have to be careful. But to sit there and to say that, and I'm really worried about these lockdowns that now they're talking about again, just at the time when people need each other the most, going after the holidays. And I'm sorry, but the media are playing games here. And I don't trust a lot of these politicians. We had a terrible time here in Michigan. Our very liberal governor and the Supreme Court stepped in and said she was wrong. The Supreme Court said you have way overstepped your bounds. So we are not people of fear. Yes, we have to be cautious and do what we're supposed to do. But at the same time, let's go and live our lives. And that's why the books, I think, both books, I think you'll find very helpful.
That's right. And then one more quick shout out to your husband, Deacon Dominic. Just tell our viewers a little bit about how did that all come about? Like suddenly, you guys were away from the church, come back to the church, and now your husband becomes a deacon. Just quickly, how did that happen?
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, it's so funny. Be careful what you pray for. Dominic prayed me back into the church, and then it turned around and seemed like overnight he was a deacon. Well, I always thought he would make a great deacon because he's the one who brought me back to the church. And if he brought me back, he could bring anybody back. And he was always good at explaining the faith to many people that he would, at work or, in our circle of family and friends. And one of our dear friends, whom Lynn Bernard from Ohio, a wonderful evangelical sister in the Lord, she asked him one day, she said, Dom, what can you do as a Catholic man in the church? Or what? I know you can't be a priest, but what can you do? He says, I can be a lector. I can do this. I can do that. Oh, and I could be a deacon. And she says, well, what is a deacon? And he explained it to Lynn, and she said, you know what? I think the Lord's calling you to be a deacon. And it took him a while to say yes. And we had, right after we came back to the church, this is another interesting story. I don't know if I ever told you this, but we were on a Holy Land trip. It was our first trip to the Holy Land in 1995. Right after we came back to the church, we came back in 94. And out of the blue, the deacon from our parish, Deacon Gene Teresa, who has since passed away, bless his heart, out of the blue on the bus came up with Dominic. We're in the Holy Land. Did you ever think about being a deacon? And that was like less
Wow.
than a year after we were back in the church. So that, and then Lynn's comments and other people suggesting it to him. And so he finally entered the seminary and was ordained 8 years ago this October. He's been a
Right.
deacon for 8 years already. So it really is amazing when you open yourself up to God. And that's why this book, Listening for God, is so important, because God may be reaching out to people right now and they may be saying, that can't be from God, because why would God talk to me? I'm not good enough. I'm not holy enough. I'm not smart enough.
Right.
But what the book does is it walks you through all these different circumstances, and each one is very different about how God chose to speak to a particular person at a particular time in just the way they could be reached because of their unique identity and their unique set of circumstances.
That's right. Well, first of all, I know I was at Deacon Dom's ordination, so it was
Father Frank. Yep.
beautiful. It was gorgeous. It was wonderful. And it's been an amazing journey for you, for Dominic, and for me. And I'm hoping real soon I'll come out and visit you in Michigan.
Your room is still waiting for you. It's there.
Okay. So finally, just for our viewers here, the 2 books, it's the coronavirus, Conquering the Coronavirus.
It's Conquering Coronavirus, How Faith Can Put Your Fears to Rest. And Listening for God. Listening for God, Incredible Ways God Speaks to Us. Now, both are from Sophia Press, the Sophia Institute Press, and I have the books in my bookstore at teresatomeo.com. You may also order them from Amazon.
Okay, perfect. But to get the 2-book deal, they have to go to what's Sophia's website?
Sophia's working on that. That's not ready yet, but if you want, it'll be up in about a week. I'll let them know that we talked about it, and they'll put it up probably even sooner. So, but yeah, you're seeing my website right there. So take a look at that. Yep, look, there they are. Yay! Okay, my 3 latest.
And then
books.
there's another good book, Beyond Sunday. I mean, that's a great book too. So you really want to check out all of Teresa's books. For those who are stuck at home and can't get out as quickly as you can, all these are great reading. And so I highly recommend them. I've read most of them. I got to read the latest 2. I'll get to those. But Teresa's books are just, they're very easy to read, but at the same time, very inspiring.
So yes, I write the way I talk. I write very fast and I speak very fast, but just as you and I are having a conversation now, it's exactly how I write. I don't.
That's right. Right through the book. Basic. Boom, boom, boom.
Boom, boom, bada boom, bada bing.
Bada bang. Okay, well, Teresa, thank you for joining me today on this program. I just loved having you here. And brothers and sisters, I'm just going to tell you that we have a special treat for you. For the next 2 weeks, while I am in California, I have handpicked some old episodes of the Catholic View for Women. Yay! So on my Just Ask Janet time slot, you're going to see some powerful programs that are going to address a lot of the problems that are still happening today in our church. And you will learn so much from those programs. So stay tuned all next week, and I'll be back with you in December when I get back live from California. Okay, so for now, this is Janet Morana, Just Ask Janet, saying goodbye. God bless.